Divorced people, what's the one glaring red flag you wish you hadn't ignored before getting married? Her friends and family didn't like me. I'm an introvert, and her friends were extroverts and very expressive. Secondly, I am one of those people with no filter, because it's easier that way sometimes than trying to find a nicer way to sugarcoat something. I started to not like hanging out with her friends, because it felt like not only was I not welcomed, but I needed to know my place and not say anything or interact. Even if we were hanging out in the apartment that she and I shared, her family wasn't much better. Her mom had my back, which was nice, but her brothers didn't care much for me, and I took the blame for everything that went wrong. For example, if I was working late and she was having back problems, she'd call her mom to come over and clean up. Her dad would call me up to bish to me about how I was having his ex-wife clean up my apartment because I was lazy. I would then have to ask what the hell he was talking about and then explain to him that I had no idea what was going on because she was making arrangements that I wasn't a part of. And that leads to the next part. I wasn't included in plans, even when they affected me or both of us. We were rear-ended once and our car was totaled. We had just paid it off, so I was thinking that now we had extra money in our budget. The insurance paid us $9,000 for the car. I wanted to buy a used car for $9,000 or less and continue without a car payment. Her best friend told her, "To hell with what your husband wants. Just put $2,000 down and then we can go shopping with the rest of the money." I honestly have no idea what happened to the rest of those $9,000. When I asked about it, all everyone ever told me was that it wasn't my business. When your spouse's family and friends make sure that your spouse doesn't treat you as an equal, your marriage is doomed. She is remarried. My dad has shown me her Facebook page and pics of her and her new husband. He's just what her family, and her friends want. A spineless beta male with no self-worth who they can kick around, abuse, and know that he'll never question or resist. Story 2. I literally didn't see it because the opportunity wasn't there. I never saw him live alone. He spent most of our late teens and early 20s living with my twin brother and roommates, international workers from the amusement park who were good friends of ours, and I moved in after that. The house in his apartment with twin bro before that was always clean enough. Every once in a while, I'd see him doing dishes or tidying up a little, and it never seemed like a big deal. Once we got married, I realized the truth. He did nothing. He contributed zero to housework. Twin bro had told me to explicitly tell him what to do, so I did, and he'd occasionally do it. But I couldn't follow him around all day, making sure he picked up after himself. As roommates gradually moved out, the house became a mess. Piles of laundry, unwashed dishes, clutter, and grocery runs piled up, and he did almost nothing to help. Then the baby was born. Again, he was minimally helpful. He would play with the kid or occasionally change a diaper, but all the extra dishes, laundry, cleaning, shopping, with the baby in tow, of course, and feedings were my responsibility. I soon realized, to his detriment, I could do this on my own, and it would actually be less work. That wasn't the only problem in our marriage, but it was the big one. The one I feel like talking about right now. The emotional and physical load of trying to maintain a home, a baby, and a household alone was exhausting. The realization that I could run the entire household solo, and often more efficiently, left me resentful and frustrated, and ultimately shaped the way I approached every other issue in the marriage. Story 3. Bad credit. I knew hers wasn't good, but I didn't realize how bad it was until after we got married. I mean, literally, right after. When we showed up with all of our stuff in a moving truck, the apartment community manager refused to give us our keys because she had a vehicle repossession on her credit that she never mentioned. I had to call my parents from their office, have them wire the money to the bank, and wait for confirmation before we could finally move in. F her for not telling me, and F the apartment manager for not checking before we got there. She also lost her temper on the person behind the deli counter at the grocery store because her quarter-pound of sliced turkey was one slice over. She insisted she had asked for exactly a quarter-pound and that she wanted a frigging quarter-pound. It was exhausting, humiliating, and surreal watching someone throw a tantrum over a few grams of lunch meat. We made it 50 weeks. 50 weeks of dealing with her nonsense, her anger, her entitlement. Then, one day, she called me from her boyfriend's house while I was visiting her parents, having her 6-year-old with me, to tell me she had spent the night with him. That was the final straw. I rented a truck, got my dad and some friends together, drove to our place, and emptied it down to the bare walls. FIU, Teresa. You dried up old hag. I survived, and I hope anyone reading this learns to watch for the warning signs before it's too late. Some people aren't worth the trouble, and sometimes the only sane response is walking away and never looking back. Story 4. Not divorced. But I was left at the altar, so to speak, 2 days before the wedding by my high school sweetheart. Best thing that ever happened to me. He was a mama's boy, but far beyond what's reasonable. If he wanted a new toy, like a computer or art supplies, he would literally go to her in tears and ask for it. He was in community college and failing his classes, but claimed it was because all the professors hated him. His mom kept paying for him to retake the same courses, like Composition 1 and college algebra. I was attending the nearby four-year university, and whenever I tried to help him, he would get angry and cry to his mom that I was making him feel stupid. He absolutely refused to get a tutor. He spent 6 years failing out of his first semester of community college. Young Gizzle felt misunderstood. Sweet, sensitive, caring, but maybe just not cut out for college. I stuck with him and paid for him to go to art school, drop out, and go back again. He eventually finished and decided he wanted to move to a larger city to find a job. He had friends in the city he'd been playing online games with for years. We arranged to share a 2-bedroom apartment with one of those friends, a female friend. As soon as we got there and moved in, things felt awkward. Conversations would stop when I walked into the room. Sometimes I'd come home from work and she'd be there, even though she had said she'd be at work. They would message back and forth late at night. This was before unlimited texting, even though she was in the room next door. He also became hyper-vigilant about his passwords, signing out of AM and similar things. And as if young Gizzle hadn't already been blind enough, the intimacy completely dried up after we moved. He never had a particularly high drive, but it went from about once a week to never. He said he was tired from job hunting all day. Whatever, we were getting married soon. Fast forward a few months of living like that. I flew home a week before the wedding so I could fly back with my mom and sister since they had never been on a plane. On the day we were supposed to return, I got a long IM from him. Not even a phone call, just an AIM message, telling me not to come back. He said he wanted to be with his female friend, that they had been carrying on a role-play relationship through IMs and emails since they were about 13, nearly a decade at that point, and that they were in love. He said he would ship my things but didn't want to see me again. Just like that, I lost my apartment, almost lost my job, and lost my fiancé. The joke was on him, though. He hadn't told his female friend that he was planning to dump me and just assumed she felt the same way. When he finally told her, she said she wanted to date a Marine and saw herself as a military wife, but that she'd always treasure what they had as kids. She threw him a couple of pity hookups while she was looking, then found her military guy and left him stuck with an apartment he couldn't afford. He had to move back across the country to live with his mom, and that was the last I heard of him. A couple of years later, I met my now husband, and we've been together 11 years. He's awesome, and he doesn't cry to his mom when he wants a new game for his Xbox. Story 5, he called me, and confessed to cheating. He was emotional and distraught because he had kissed a girl. I thought it was almost cute and endearing, mostly because we were 18 and I didn't consider us to be dating or having any real obligations to one another. We'd gone on a few dates right after graduation, then both went off to out-of-state colleges. I had gone out with other guys during and since, but somehow that conversation became the starting point of our exclusive relationship. I married him 4 years later, and that's when the strange cheating accusations began. They usually started with silence. He wouldn't speak to me for days. Then came the questions, like where I had been at noon 2 weeks earlier. He'd bring up me dating other guys in college, especially during the period when we objectively were not a couple. Over time, the pattern became predictable. Moodiness, insinuations, arguments, and about every 5 years, a full-blown meltdown over some imagined betrayal or unaccounted for moment. At one point, he brought a friend over and sat her down to tell her I was cheating with her husband because he and I spent too much time together. We were work partners and only socialized as couples with our spouses. We separated, went to counseling, got back together, and slowly the cycle restarted. 5 years later, one of his friends made a stupid joke on his social media about his work trip, and somehow that meant I was cheating again. We separated, went to counseling, got back together. He never confronted the friend. They're still close. 5 years after that, he decided I was cheating while I was at a community college play with friends, an event he had been invited to. He locked me out of our home and even tied the garage door down so I couldn't get in. That was the final time. We divorced after that. Looking back, I realize now that his fears were rooted in childhood trauma. He grew up in a home where betrayal and infidelity were normalized, and he never recovered from the deep sense of abandonment he felt when both his father and stepfather completely exited his life. That fear carried into our marriage, creating cycles of suspicion, anger, and control that no amount of love could fix. I don't hate him. I wish he could heal and learn to trust. But there is a limit to how much one person can tolerate emotional abuse in the name of empathy. I wish I could tell 18-year-old me to run for the hills. Don't cheat. The consequences don't stop with you. They echo through your family for generations, leaving wounds that take decades, if ever, to mend. Story 6. Together for almost 10 years, married for just over one. From the outside, we were the textbook high school sweethearts. Everyone admired us. People thought we had it all figured out, but behind closed doors, it was completely different. When we got married, he changed. Suddenly, he acted like marriage gave him the right to demand anything of me. I was no longer a partner. He treated me like an object, something to be owned. Any problem I tried to address or fix was met with, "Well, you married me like this," with no acknowledgement of his behavior or any willingness to change. My concerns, my feelings, my needs, they didn't matter. It took the death of someone very close to me for me to truly open my eyes and see our relationship for what it was: controlling, manipulative, and emotionally abusive. I asked for space. He went completely insane. He locked me in the house for hours, got physical, and even faked a self-harm attempt to manipulate me into staying. By this point, I had mentally checked out completely. I just wanted him to leave me alone and let me live. It wasn't until he was arrested twice for assault and a restraining order was issued that he finally got the message. For the first time, I was free. I wasn't controlled anymore. I could breathe, think, and exist without fear. Never settle for someone so selfish, so unwilling to work on themselves, or so determined to dominate and manipulate you. Your safety, your sanity, and your peace of mind are worth more than years of fear, guilt, or obligation. Don't compromise for the illusion of love. True partnership is mutual, respectful, and nurturing, not controlling. Story 7. I'm not divorced myself, but as a lawyer, I've witnessed a few marriages implode. One thing I know for sure, if you can't sit down at the kitchen table and honestly go over the household finances together, you won't be able to remain married. I'm not saying you have to actually do it all the time, but you must be able to. Couples who can't be open and honest about money rarely make it as a married pair. Story 8. I married my first wife extremely quickly. She wanted to get married, and I didn't want to break up. On the day of the wedding, my friends asked how I was feeling, and I said, "Well, I can always get divorced. Don't settle. Marry someone you truly love and can see spending your life with. Someone you'll still want to hang out with when you're both old, fat, and infirm." I'm remarried now, and it makes a world of difference. When you're with the right person, you just know it. If you don't know it, you probably aren't with the right person. Story 9. My wife cheated on every long-term partner she ever had. She cheated on her first boyfriend with his brother. Looking back, she would talk about it almost as if she were proud of it, as if they deserved it. According to her, every guy she ever dated was abusive. Plot twist, she cheated on me as well, and when her family found out, she accused me of being abusive. There were several red flags. I just thought she had grown up. Edit. She is also a pathological liar. From the start, she lied about things that weren't important, and that I couldn't understand why she wouldn't just tell the truth. Over time, she started lying about almost everything, as if she lived in a private world where her lies were reality. Story 10. I began coming home to find I was alone. I'd wake up and she'd be gone. Even on my days off, she was always out with her friends, most of them men. At first, I thought nothing of it. My wife can have friends I don't know, and I trust her around men. I don't want to be controlling. She was constantly angry with me and yelled all the time. She spoke poorly of her own family behind their backs, even though they were very nice to me. She constantly compared our relationship to her sister and her husband's, clearly jealous. Over time, intimacy tapered off and eventually disappeared altogether. Story 11. I was on bed rest while pregnant with our son. Due to preterm labor, 5 months, I was told no physical relations as that could start the labor again. Even though we were living together and engaged and the child was his, he decided that since I was not putting out, under doctor orders, that it was not considered cheating to go do it with a 19-year-old. We were married 15 years, and he never would agree that he cheated. It was my fault for withholding. Story 12. Answering for my mom. She was married for 20-plus years. She tried everything: books, therapy, attempting to be the perfect wife. She had dinner ready after work, even though he got out at 3 and she got out at 5. She cleaned the house, and he played video games. He was abusive to her and I, even the dog. But once I moved out, he took out everything on her. He couldn't divvy his anger up anymore. She started spending more and more weekends at my house. Then, just before Christmas, she left. My dad said she did a horrible thing to him by leaving and that I was betraying him by staying neutral. He can get bent. I haven't talked to him in 3 years. Story 13. One of my friends is getting divorced after less than a year because of how awful this person was and how quickly they showed their true colors. At first, there were subtle signs, but once the marriage happened, the controlling behavior ramped up fast. Right after he proposed, he immediately told her that most of her friends and coworkers, especially the attractive ones, made him uncomfortable and demanded she cut off contact. When she said no, he took it a step further. He started making threads on Reddit and other websites asking for advice. He'd show her the posts where random anonymous people agreed with him and called her a bad person for not wanting to cut ties with her own friends. It was manipulative and psychologically abusive. It didn't stop there. He became extremely controlling over her body, asking her to weigh herself regularly so he could make sure she wasn't gaining weight and he could stay attracted to her. Every action, every decision was scrutinized through the lens of his insecurity and need for control. She finally left this garbage human after a pregnancy scare. Since then, she's been slowly reconnecting with people, though many friendships have been severely strained or lost entirely. This experience has been a painful but important reminder. If someone demands you cut off your support system, they are not worth it. True love doesn't isolate you, it uplifts and supports you. Story 14. I enjoyed my time away from him more than time with him. I would get super depressed when I knew he was going to be home from work soon. I brushed it off as being antisocial or independent. But now I'm with someone who I'm still excited to see every single day after 7 years, and I'm still antisocial and independent. Story 15. Not divorced, but we lived together and dated for years, so the breakup felt like a divorce. He was perfect at first. Then I started noticing how angry he would get over small things. While driving, if anything happened that he felt was unfair, he would roll down the window and scream. Looking back, I don't know why I ignored that. Once we started living together, that anger really showed. If I did anything wrong, he got angry. Accidentally stood in front of the TV for 2 seconds? Angry. Didn't rinse a dish properly before putting it in the dishwasher? Angry. Used something of his without permission. Lotion, toothpaste, ramen, whatever. Angry. Story 16. Lies about small, seemingly insignificant things, but often. If someone can lie easily about small things, they can absolutely lie when it's something big. A small example, I met my ex-wife's friend, and she introduced her as her sister. No issue with that, until her sister needed to borrow money and other favors. I didn't even find out she wasn't actually her sister until years into the marriage. Story 17. There was no cardinal sin. We were together for 11 years. It was a slow burn. We were both troubled and unhappy in general, and I worked on it. I tried tons of things to make changes in my life and my perception. I invited him to try every single thing I did, together and separately. He made no effort to change and just stayed unhappy. In the end, I was a profoundly different person, and he was almost exactly the same. The whole time we were together, he would dismiss things I said as silly. Everything. House buying and selling suggestions, directions, how to cook dinner, renovations, hobbies, movies and music I liked, sexy time stuff, camping, family things. I didn't respect myself enough to stand up for myself. Then I learned self-respect and damn, I ended up isolating myself from him and realized how lonely I was. Edit. I just wanted to add that the hardest thing I have ever done in my life was telling him I didn't respect him or trust him anymore, and that I had decided to leave. Story 18. She was not kind to people she felt were beneath her. Waitresses, housekeeping, mechanics, etc., but she was very beautiful, so I didn't think as much about it as I should. I remember the exact moment I realized I didn't love her anymore. I was sweaty from playing basketball, and she said, "You are going to shower, right? You played basketball with all those black guys. How did I miss all those cues when we were dating?" Also, she believes Jesus only loves American white people in the Second Amendment. And she believes dinosaurs and men were on the earth at the same time and got on a boat together. Story 19. So many things. 1. My parents and friends couldn't stand her. We broke up once before we got married. Everyone was very relieved, then very disappointed when we got back together. 2. She was very jealous of anything I accomplished. It was me versus her in her mind. 3. She blamed me for her shortcomings and situations, never took responsibility for things happening in her life, regardless of her power to change them. Those are the big ones. There were quite a few others. We've been divorced for going on 2 years now. Couldn't be happier. Story 20. Felt like I was going to vomit every time I thought about the wedding. Didn't care anything about planning it. Let my friends pick everything, including my dress. Sobbed at my bachelorette party. Tried to runaway bride it day of wedding. I was 21 and felt trapped. Should listen to my dad. Story 21. I was concerned that he had a disproportionate preoccupation with the fact that I was young. I didn't ignore it. I even addressed it. You know I'm going to get older, right? I won't always be this young. I want to make sure that's not why you want to marry me. I have no interest in being a trophy wife. I wanted to be sure that wasn't the reason he was so attracted to me. He assured me that it wasn't. He's 7 years older. Maybe it wasn't simply the fact that I was young, but I do think it was the fact that he felt he had the upper hand through life experience and earning power, and that he should make all the decisions. He didn't really want a grown woman. 7 years, 2 kids, and endless support and compromise from me later. He divorced me when I was 30. He dates women 18 to 20 years younger than he is now. Thank God I never gave up on securing my education and professional standing. His loss. Story 22. My friends and family warned me that my ex wasn't good for me. I ignored them for 6 years of on and off dating until we finally got married. It took me only 4 months of being married to realize they had been right all along. It wasn't one specific event that made me wake up. It was a slow, creeping realization that I wasn't happy. It was one of the craziest things I've ever experienced. 6 years of thinking she was the girl I'd spend my life with, and it only took 4 months of marriage for me to see how unhappy she made me. The real kicker? Looking back, I don't think I was ever actually in love with her. My family and friends have told me repeatedly that I have a pattern of trying to fix the broken ones without regard for my own feelings. They saw what I was doing long before I ever did. That realization was both humbling and painful, but it helped me understand why I stayed as long as I did. As a guy, I carried the stigma that I couldn't be on the receiving end of abuse, but if there was ever proof, for me, that a man can be truly emotionally abused, it was my relationship with her. Constant manipulation, guilt-tripping, and undermining my confidence wore me down over time. It took leaving the relationship and reflecting on it to understand the depth of the damage. To be honest, it feels oddly satisfying to finally say some of that aloud. The process of acknowledging it, writing it down, and sharing it publicly has been part of my healing. Edit. I truly appreciate the positive sentiment. I still struggle with this stuff, and the comments, even the upvotes, mean a lot. It reminds me I'm not alone and that my feelings are valid, even if society tells men they should just tough it out. Story 23. So many red flags. 1. He left me for the woman who he flirted with and had Bible studies with nearly daily during our 5-year relationship. She was nearly 30 years older than him. 2. We never had any sort of hand-holding, cuddling, etc. If I didn't let him do it to me, I was the horrible person, yet I couldn't get a simple kiss on the cheek. 3. Anzwas. We had broke off our engagement for nearly 3 months because of the issue with woman mentioned earlier, only to get back together and get married, buy a house in less than 4 months. 4. And at our wedding, I wasn't the center of his attention, and he was picking fights with me. Actually, this was daily life for 5 years. I could go on forever. Screw him. Story 24. She became overwhelmed by even the tiniest setbacks. Someone said something marginally rude to her at work, and she had to take the rest of the shift off because she was fuming so much, for example. Turns out she was that way with everything. Story 25. She wanted to go out every weekend. It seemed like something easy to compromise on, but it was indicative of 2 very different lifestyles. To her, having a big group of friends to hang out with was important. She wanted to cultivate that, be a part of stories, be extroverted, just social. That was never a want or need for me. I didn't mind it occasionally, but the fact that we didn't want the same things led to a never-ending fight that we couldn't see a way around. It was all downhill from the start. We were just too blind to see. Story 26. I knew I shouldn't have done it. I grew up sheltered and very Catholic. I was pregnant. Even though I was 24, didn't live at home, and had no issue providing for myself and child, I folded to my family. Every fiber of my being was screaming as I walked towards him on our wedding day. We didn't last. We were both miserable. He cheated, and I didn't care. We had no relationship. 8 years later, I am happily married with another child. He is still miserable. I hope it turns around for him. He deserves better. Story 27. Antidepressant meds. No criticism regarding the treatment itself, obviously. My ex-wife combined it with drinking, and it evolved to erratic behavior and led to nightly blackouts. Next, GF of 2 years neglected to refill her prescription, and I found myself installing a deadbolt on my bedroom door, which she later took down with an axe. True, here's Johnny Redrum story. Story 28. Little late to the party, but here we go. First things was, I could never do enough to make her happy. I did all the housework and yard work. Nothing was enough. I wasn't allowed to be tired because my job was sitting at a desk for 9 hours a day staring at a computer screen. Second thing, we both had childhoods where neither of our fathers were in the picture. We talked about kids, and she asked if I could be a stay-at-home dad. She made about 2.5 times more than what I did. I told her yes, and she told me she couldn't respect me. Third thing, she was still attached by the cord to her mom. The money we received as wedding presents went to her mom so she could keep her house and not move in with us. There is more, but I'll leave you with 2 quick stories. One time, she threatened to kick me out of the house because I ate her cookies that hadn't been touched in about a month. The other thing is, she told me she wanted a divorce over text. Thank God we were only married for 6 months before filing. Story 29. Man, children don't grow up. A 25-year-old who sits on his bum eating pizza and playing video games with no hobbies, ambition, life skills, or charisma is going to just turn into a 40-year-old who sits on his bum eating pizza and playing video games with no hobbies, ambition, life skills, or charisma, and no amount of wishing, or intervening, or pushing, or encouragement will get them to be an adult. Story 30, not divorced, but probably should have been. Concerned when she told me she broke up with her boyfriend, slept together, then told me she hadn't actually broken up with him yet. Waited another few days for that one. I should have just left right then instead of waiting to be the other guy in that situation 2 years later. Most relationships that start with cheating are doomed from the start, kids. Story 31. Well, he didn't want to be involved in wedding planning. He waited until 3 days before the wedding to buy his outfit, even though he had known the date a year and a half in advance. When I pushed him on anything, he'd get angry and frustrated. He switched jobs frequently, usually because he'd get mad and quit. In the 10 years we were together, I don't think he stayed at a single job for more than a year. I thought it was bad luck at first, but I realize now he was probably difficult to work with and never took emotional breaks at work. He was darkly depressed and completely uninterested in seeking help. It was my job to put up with it and be flexible around his feelings. Mine didn't matter. He wouldn't do anything with me outside of eating. No parties, no after-work drinks, no walks with the dog, no grocery shopping help. Yet he would go out with his friends to all hours of the night in his car group, and I wasn't invited. He'd talk me out of doing gifts for each other to save money, which meant I never got presents from him for my birthday, Valentine's Day, or Christmas. Story 32. I didn't find out until later on while we were dating she was hiding a long-term relationship she was in. She was cheating on her BF for 8 years with me. When she told me about it, she had already broken it off with him. 6 years later, after being married with kids, she cheated on me. If she cheats for you, she will cheat on you. Story 33. Mentally abusive. He never laid a hand on me, but sometimes I feel it would have been easier to leave him over if he did. It was small things he would say, and when I would go to work and talk about it, my coworkers would flip their shit. We were engaged for years, but the only reason we got married was because he threatened to leave me if we didn't. I wasn't ready because I knew the red flags, but my pride and fear of being alone kept me from leaving. Wedding night was horrible. He refused to sit with me and go around talking to guests and refused to do the first dance. Even his own family asked me why I was with him, and his cousins tried to convince me to find someone better. A month after our wedding, he told me he wanted a divorce because he now thought I was fat. I was the same, if not smaller. We were together for exactly a year when we finally split up, and it was the best frigging day of my life. The only reason I cried was because I didn't know how to be independent. I had never lived by myself. Story 34. Opposites don't always attract. It might be cute for a while once you're dating, but after you live together, get married and share a home, it fell apart hard. You can be with someone who has a lot in common with you while still being a different person. And don't settle. There are more potential great matches for you out there than you realize. Story 35. I knew there were a bunch of things I disliked about my ex and several ways in which we were not compatible, but I figured it was time to settle, and that if I was too picky, I'd be alone forever. I was terribly anxious on my wedding day, but wrote it off as normal jitters. On the day of my second wedding, I felt absolutely fine. Normal jitters was not a thing in my case. It was a massive waving red flag that I ignored. Story 36. She said he freaked out once at a party because she smoked occasionally. He decided they couldn't hang out with that group anymore. She was very popular and had a lot of friends in her home state. They moved away before they got married. On their wedding night, he told her they were not moving back to her home state as planned because he had decided he didn't like his boss there. There was no room for discussion. She had already had the kitchen packed up for a week because she was so excited. She cried for 3 days straight. He had no idea how to treat a wife. He seemed to think that gaining a wife was the end goal, and that there was no reason to keep being kind, romantic, or considerate. He treated her like an employee, or worse, a servant, responsible for household duties. He was verbally abusive about her weight and constantly went behind her back, asking her friends to help pressure her into working out more. Over time, she sank deeper into depression and lost so much of her self-worth while she was with him. He also wasn't very interested in being involved in the kids' lives. She carried most of the responsibility. For a good portion of it, she was a stay-at-home mom, which allowed her to devote more time. But the imbalance was obvious. He would go to their sons' sports events, but rarely to their daughters. He often forgot to leave work on time. He literally had to set an alarm to pick up his daughter and take her to after-school activities. It was always his way or the highway. He only wanted to do things he enjoyed and never tried to connect with others through their hobbies because he didn't understand them or bother trying. TV shows and video games were a waste of time. He micromanaged everyone else's time to an extreme degree. My mom started reading constantly because he would nag if she watched anything other than the news. She finally got the nerve to leave once my brother went off to college and I was in high school. He doesn't seem to understand other people's emotions very well. He has now been divorced twice. The second marriage lasted about 2 years, and he has another girlfriend who doesn't want to marry him. She isn't interested in moving in with him and prefers living in the city rather than the country. He even had the nerve to ask me if my significant other treats me well. It took a lot of willpower not to throw that back in his face. He visited us recently and nitpicked everything. I can't stand being around him for more than a couple of days before I lose it. I'm the daughter. Story 37. Not divorced, but 3.5-year relationship. When we moved in, he stopped wanting to spend time with me. All his free time was spent playing League of Legends. Never wanted to go out on dates or group hangs with my friends. Said that his friends would like me, so I never hung out with his friends either. I'm also admittedly a difficult person to live with. I'm bipolar with psychotic episodes. At the time, I was not diagnosed. He ignored my psychotic episodes. He tried hooking me up with his lesbian coworker. Also went on and on about his hot classmate. Then he wanted us to take a break too because our relationship was bad. The final nail in the coffin was when I got pregnant. He didn't feel like using rubber and insisted on doing it. Once he held me down while I kept saying I wasn't ready for a baby. Once I got that positive pregnancy test, he demanded that I get an abortion, or he would dump me. The abortion was a rough recovery for me and he was no help. So we broke up and I met my future husband 2 months later. I hate that I wasted 3.5 years of my 20s on that a-hole. Story 38. I've been divorced 2 times. The first was a total shock. The second one had signs everywhere, but because we had 2 kids together, I tried everything to make it work. The biggest sign came when I returned home a day early from a road trip without calling ahead. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch watching a movie with her guy friend from work. I flipped out. She accused me of not trusting her. A month later, we split up, and shortly after that, she made it public that she was with him. Story 39. The first red flag was when we had only been together for a couple months before 9/11, and I had an opportunity to go help out on behalf of my company in New York. She threw such a fit about even just the idea of me going there. In the end, our group went needed anyway, but that was the first indication that maybe we weren't on the same wavelength. Thinking back on it, there were plenty more red flags after this one. Story 40. He's a very nice, stable, responsible, and autistic person, and nothing like anyone I'd ever had a relationship with before. For example, he's religious and teetotal. Me, not so much. My dad asked me if I was sure I wouldn't get bored and frustrated. I was sure. 6 years later, I was a lot less sure. We're still friends, but I really should have realized I was settling for a lifestyle that just didn't suit me at all. Story 41. Her parents' relationship history was a huge warning sign. Her mom abandoned her father, her and her 2 siblings, moved to another state, married another man, and had 2 more kids with him. My ex-wife and I got married because she got pregnant, among other reasons, but her aunt and uncle thankfully agreed to adopt the baby. 7 years later, she cheated on me, moved 250 miles away with the guy, got engaged, and just had a child with him. As the saying goes, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. Side note, his family hates her. He's over $45,000 in debt, can't get his transcripts transferred to another university until he repays it. He had a full ride but dropped out and has to pay the scholarship back in full. And he works at Best Buy. Story 42. Friends all warned me that she was loose in high school. I didn't go to school in the town I live in. She wouldn't stop talking to her many exes despite my requests, and telling her the amount of time she spent talking and that she was so secretive of it made me extremely uncomfortable and sick with worry. She insisted I was overthinking and that she had changed since her teenage years. Fast forward 2 years, I'm away for school and she's pregnant. Her best friend and brothers both told me initially, and she tried to tell me it was mine, but the timelines didn't match. After I left her, it came out that she'd been sleeping with several exes while I was off in Fire Academy, as well as guys she had met on Tinder and the like. She took it upon herself to rob me before I got back and killed my dog. The whole thing was devastating, but looking back on it, I should have seen it coming a mile off. Love is blind, eh? Joke's on her, she's in jail now. Story 43. A few weeks into our relationship, maybe a month, she suddenly had to do something big with this guy who liked her. She had to let him down easy because we were getting serious. I didn't actually realize until after we were done, and I looked the guy up that she was dating a married man, and decided to break it off because I was in the picture. Of course, she found someone else, lied to me for a while, and then I found out about it, and that was that. Story 44. My ex had to control every aspect of the wedding, including my dress. I thought it was sweet at the time, but he pushed my friends and family out of the shopping process and basically picked out my dress for me. We fought over the details. I wanted a small, affordable wedding. He wanted a grand wedding that would make everyone jealous. Everything was about status and showing off. The biggest red flag of all was that I nearly had a panic attack walking down the aisle. I wanted to run. Sure, I told myself that cold feet was common, but when you look back on my wedding photos, you'll see that my smile is never real. I was miserable. I fell into a depression during the honeymoon and hardly enjoyed myself. He was abusive and controlling. Eventually, things escalated to full-out mental abuse and even essay. He wanted to control everything about me. I was so young and naive, though. I didn't see it before the wedding. I thought it was normal to be nervous before the big day. What's not normal is actively dreading it and telling yourself during the ceremony that divorce is always an option to calm yourself. Story 45. I met my wife in Vietnam in the summer of 1975. Back then, we didn't have phones to text each other or look back and say, "Oh, cool, we met on this day." But I can still tell you exactly when it was. May 1st, 1975, the day after Saigon fell. She came from a wealthy family, but as communism spread in Vietnam, she was forced to leave. She had 5 brothers, and she knew that if she stayed, she would likely be forced into S-work for Chinese soldiers stationed there. Communism in Vietnam was not exactly glamorous. She was the most beautiful Asian woman I had ever laid eyes on. God rest her soul. Fast forward 6 months. We had crossed into communist China because my military superiors would not allow me to bring her back to the States. Our plan was to reach Japan through Hong Kong and eventually make our way to Canada. But plans don't always work out. We ended up stuck in a cold city called Harbin in northeastern China for 3 years, trying to save enough money for the long trip south. We lived in a tiny, dirty apartment. In the front hall where we kept our shoes, there was a Chinese flag that I always ignored. Story 46, that he was a horrible human being. I thought I could fix whatever was broken inside him. Sadly, that's what so many people believe when they are with those kinds of people who are just so damaged. Also, I tried to back out and was guilted into going through with it. I should have stuck to my guns. Story 47. A little different, I guess. My widowed mom started dating a man from her Sunday school class who had recently divorced. He was very quiet but kind. Her friends in the class told her he was rarely home, always hunting or working, but that he was a good man. They were warning her without trying to scare her off. He and my mom got married. Still very quiet, still kind. It turned out he was deeply depressed. His wife of 25 years had been cheating on him with the same man for at least half that time. He worked constantly or went on hunting trips with friends because he didn't want to be at home. My mom once told him it was a shame he couldn't retire so they could just enjoy their time together. He was 50 and my mom was 53. He said he could retire, and he did. They spent the next 20 plus years having a wonderful life, traveling often and simply enjoying each other's company. They had a great marriage before he passed away, and he is missed by all of us. Sometimes a divorce is 100% the fault of one person. Just because you divorced doesn't mean you failed. Story 48. I had a good friend that married and divorced a guy that was rumored to be gay. My brother and his friend tried to tell the gal about this, and they were not believed and no longer friends after that discussion. 5 years and a child later, she hired a detective to confirm her suspicions he was cheating on her. Well, turns out he was cheating with men at a gym. You can't tell people something they don't want to hear. And the friendship never recovered even after the divorce. Story 49. Intuition was the biggest factor I ignored. There were other minor things like the fact that we largely had different tastes in music, but deep down inside, something screamed that I would regret marrying this woman. Neither of us are bad people. We just don't see eye to eye. And it took way too long for us to acknowledge that. Story 50. Not about me, but my sister and her husband. When I first met him, my sister had him over at my parents' and they were playing a game. I joined them. Our cat jumped up, and the guy was immediately very rude to her. I don't care who you are, you don't act like a D-head to an animal without good cause. Additionally, he's mildly passive-aggressive. Sometimes he's loud to the point where it makes you feel uncomfortable. 3 years later, and their marriage is pretty rocky. He can't hold down a steady job within his field, and they are barely talking. The main problem is that my sister is high maintenance emotionally, and he has no idea how to deal or communicate with her. Plus, he spends a lot of time ignoring her and playing video games. It's super toxic. I've been hoping for a while that they get divorced. Even my pretty traditional mom wants it to happen. The problem is there are some mild religious factors preventing a speedy divorce. Plus, I can't bear to think what my sister would go through. It's so painful to watch. Story 51. I ignored her hissy fits. I ignored her constantly trying to change me into someone else. I ignored the fact that she had a problem with everyone, and according to her, everyone treated her so badly. Pro tip, If you have problems, everyone is so mean to you. You're the common denominator. You're the problem. Once we were married, I went from the savior to the problem. Everything was my fault. Even though I was the one in therapy and I was the one pushing for marriage counseling and I was the one bending over backwards to provide for her constant demands. Once I got fed up and wanted out, suddenly she wanted to do things to try and work it out. Over time, I realized that she had a serious personality disorder, and she wasn't even putting any effort into her own therapy once I finally got her to go. She messed up my life badly. We were only married 2 years and together 3, and she absolutely set me back. I should have been graduated and in a great job by now. Now I'm living with my parents, penniless, and still trying to make it through a new school to finish my degree. Story 52. Hoo boy. There were a few, but probably the biggest was how he treated his parents. Just had no respect for them. Never wanted to talk to them. Always blew off their opinions. Now, they're not exactly stellar people themselves, but it was still not cool. Oh, and the amount of alcohol consumed by everyone in that house on a daily basis. Yikes. Story 53. He got fired from 2 jobs for stealing things. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I caught him in several lies, including the stories about how he lost his jobs. And his sister showed up one day telling me to wait to get married. I was so emotionally drained from some things going on in my own family that I ignored it all and got married anyway. I wanted to create a perfect marriage and life. 17 years later, yes, 17, I am finally free, happier than I've ever been, enjoying being single and excited for what's to come. Advice. Listen to those little voices in your head that tell you it's not quite right and you can't change people. Story 54. Before marriage, we went to a place she was working at on making and maintaining a website. She told them she wants more money. They said no. She said that now that she's getting married, she won't need to work. I thought she was negotiating. Story 55. I've never been married or divorced myself, but I have quite a few friends who have. For some of them, I know their situations well and can clearly see what they ignored. A friend from college married a guy she dated through most of school, but they divorced after maybe 2 years of marriage. Back in college, I remember another friend telling me that this guy had either texted or privately messaged her, saying he wanted to be with her instead of his then-girlfriend. There may have been some inappropriate comments as well. My friend reached out to his girlfriend to tell her what had been said. What did the girlfriend do? She completely ignored the warning, unfriended the girl on Facebook, and eventually married and divorced this guy. My friend had a reputation as a party animal, but she was not a liar. Another friend of mine is getting divorced right now. The other night was the first time our friend group had really hung out since she filed. She and her soon-to-be ex were together for 8 years, married for just about 2. Someone asked what happened, and she said her partner had habits she didn't like when they were dating, but she assumed they would improve once they got married. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Story 56. He withheld affection and intimacy. He was manipulative, gaslighting, and emotionally abusive. It wasn't so much that I ignored the red flags. It's that I was naive enough to believe that if I tried hard enough, he would treat me the way I asked to be treated. All told, though, I got the best part of him, my daughter and son. Right now, I'm struggling with the fact that he's in a relationship with someone I used to consider a friend, and he's doing all the nice things for her that I wanted for myself when we were married. I find out things through the kids. Daddy got B a pretty necklace. Daddy is taking B on vacation. I don't regret ending my marriage, but it hurts. I'm lonely and it makes me irrationally question myself, wondering why I don't evoke the same feelings in men that make them treat me well. Story 57. I have never been married. My dad has been married 6 times though, and as his son, I've noticed some things all future wives of my dad should know. 1. He's a liar, and he's really good at it, but he has a tell. He smiles and nods his head slightly when he's confirming information he doesn't know. He talks with his hands when he's giving information he knows is false. 2. He gaslights his women and children. You'll leave your phone on the coffee table, then come back to find it's missing. You'll frantically search the entire house as well as the car only to find it exactly where you left it. He's passed a lie detector test on more than one occasion. 3. He cheats like nobody's. Business. He'll claim he's working late on random days of the week, but he's actually hanging out with his other girlfriend, ex. 4. He's manipulative and mentally abusive. On the surface, he seems like a nice, charismatic dude who's got his crap together. Beneath those thick layers of BS lie an angry man with a short fuse who will do whatever it takes to get his way. I used to sleep with a pencil clenched in my hand under my pillow in fear he would try to kill me in my sleep. 5, and he appears to be wealthy, but he's in debt. He relies on his ability to seduce women, marry them, move into their house, and open a joint bank account in order to keep these appearances up. I love my dad for some reason. He kept me fed and gave me a bed, but part of me also hates him for everything he's done to my mother and to me. He is not husband-father material, and I feel sorry for his current wife for what's about to come. I don't think marriage makes a whole lot of sense. Someone, why do you need to pay loads of money just to get it in writing? That's not what marriage was intended for. If you desperately want to get married, though, make sure you really know the person before you get married. Even when you think you know them, you probably don't. Story 58. His temper when he was drunk was terrifying. He never hit me, though he came dangerously close once. He never wanted to talk about money. At one point during our marriage, I wasn't working, but was pursuing my MBA. He told me that because he was working, the money was his. I could use it, but I was never allowed to question how he spent it. After we got married, he started getting fired from jobs. Now he has no job, no money, and is probably close to being evicted from his apartment. Story 59. Oh boy, where do I begin? His mother coming over after a minor disagreement and telling me she had never seen him so drunk. Him not coming home on Thanksgiving because he was too drunk to drive. Home from the bar that was less than a quarter mile away. We had walked home from that same bar many times. Him telling me I was fat, ugly, stupid, lazy, and more while I worked 16-hour days to pay for our wedding. Him screaming at my dad the very first time they met. His drinking problem. His extreme narcissism. Listen, folks, if your gut tells you something is wrong, it's wrong. Walk away. So many people later told me they thought he was wrong for me, but they thought I was happy, so they said nothing. It makes me sick to think about it now. However, I firmly believe that if I hadn't gone through that before, I wouldn't love and appreciate the amazing man I'm with now. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to suck to leave that D-bag, but you will find someone who makes you believe in love again. Story 60. Anytime he became angry with me, which could be sparked by anything, whether I didn't seem happy enough or laughed too much at someone else's joke instead of telling me what was wrong, he'd ignore me, go completely cold, force me to ask over and over, apologize over and over without having any idea what I was apologizing for. It could go for days. I'd eventually break down in tears, begging for him to speak to me. I was young. I always assumed I deserved it somehow. Story 61. I ignored the things that she had done as a teenager. We got married at 23, and I figured she had grown up and would no longer care to act like a teenager. I was way wrong. And after having 3 kids, she became a drunken party animal that didn't want to do anything but act like a teenager. Story 62. He refused to hold a job or even watch our child. But being from an overly religious family, I felt the obligation to marry him. It was a miserable 2 years of him cheating on me while I worked to support us, and one of his friends that was living with us. But I got the last laugh. I've been dating his best friend for the last 4 years, and he is my best friend in the whole world. Never get married for someone else's reasons. Story 63. Going through the divorce right now. We were together 16 years, married for 10 of them. He had to be in control of every situation, and in my head, it was because he knew how to handle things better than I did. He came from money, I came from nothing. His grandparents bought him a house, and we moved in together, got pregnant soon after. I wanted to go back to school before that ever happened, but didn't. He wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom, but criticized me for not having an education because I dropped out of high school due to family troubles. He said going back for my GED was useless because I wasn't good for anything. He hit me, abused me mentally, emotionally, and verbally. My mother had a stroke and heart attack, and while she was dying in hospice, he called me to yell at me to come home because he wanted dinner. Like a dumb A, I left and went home because he told me to. My family was so pissed. My cousin called to tell me my mom died not long after I left. I broke down and cried, and he said, "Stop friggin' crying. Our son doesn't need to see that crap." In front of me, he told his friends all I was good for was cooking, cleaning, and banging, then laughed about it. Lied to me to get me to sign my name off the house we bought. He said the papers were for something else, so I just did what he told me. I trusted everything he said and did most of the things he wanted, even the disgusting and degrading ones. He actually pushed me into getting a job where I had to take my clothes off for money. And no, it wasn't in clubs, and it made me feel dirty and embarrassed. I finally couldn't take it anymore and left him a year ago today. I got my GED, I'm back in school, taking care of my son, talking to a therapist, and working on me. He screwed me up in so many ways, but I will not let him keep me down ever again. Screw him. Story 64. He was attracted to me for my confidence and high self-esteem, 2 qualities I prided myself on after years of insecurity. He said his exes lacked confidence and were so insecure that when they broke up, they defamed his character by spreading lies about him. He lived in a small town, so this was huge. Because he seemed nice and trustworthy when we met, I believed him. But sure enough, he proved to be emotionally and verbally abusive. After years of his constant criticism and degrading comments, My self-esteem eroded, and I wasn't nearly as confident as I was when I first met him. When I tried to talk about his abusive tendencies, he said, "You're just like all my previous girlfriends. You're going to go off and tell everyone I'm abusive just like they did. You just want to hurt me by spreading lies about my character. You've disappointed me." Story 65. I'm going to start by saying that my ex-wife had a hidden affair with my best friend. I could point to a lot of things in the past and say I was warned. My parents didn't like her, I cheated on my girlfriend with her, and more. But honestly, it's all perspective. Those things didn't determine that we would split, and we were likely capable of working through them. We chose not to, though. We ended because we didn't communicate, ended up growing too far apart, and weren't willing to do whatever it took to make it work. What I'm trying to say is that it's all person by person. Story 66. He cheated on me, and we had recently gotten back together after dealing with that. To be fair, I was barely 18 when we got married, but I still shouldn't have been so shocked when, just a few years later, I found out he was having another affair. On top of that, he has a third child who is about a year younger than our youngest. So not only was he cheating, but he was doing so without protection. I consider myself lucky he didn't bring home an STD. Story 67. I was married for 9 years and together with my ex for 3 years before that. There was never a single red flag. Relationships and marriage aren't that black and white. To believe otherwise is naive and sets you up for failure, disappointment, and hard times. She changed. I changed. We were no longer compatible. That's what it came down to. Don't look at your life, friendships, or relationships in just black and white. It's never that simple. Story 68. He was constantly running to his ex anytime we had an argument, telling her everything. He drank day in and day out, often getting completely smashed. He was extremely selfish about almost everything and very manipulative. He lied about things he didn't even need to lie about. I recognized all of this at the time, but manipulative people have a way of breaking you down while making you feel like if you just do better, you can fix things, though you'll never measure up to them. I remember thinking to myself many times, I can deal with this for the rest of my life. I couldn't. It took me 7 years, but I finally found the strength to kick him out and start rebuilding. I hadn't worked in 3 years and didn't have a job when I kicked him out, but within a week, I had one. When your back is against the wall, you do what you have to do. It felt like being 18 again and moving out on my own for the first time. But I did it once. I did it again. And I vowed from that moment on that I would never be dependent on a man again. Story 69. The biggest issue was that she called everything a red flag, real or imagined. If I wanted her to stop arguing so I could get at least 3 hours of sleep before work, that was a red flag. If she was rude to my family and I didn't defend her, that was a red flag. If I tried to stop a conversation that was turning into an interrogation, that was a red flag. If my driving didn't exactly match hers, that was a red flag. If I reminded her of times I had caught her lying, that was a red flag. Also, this might be the real lead. She was addicted to drugs and actually did them in front of me on our first date. Story 70. Gaslighting, anger, volatility, and control issues. I didn't really give it long enough to see all the signs. Married after a year, me 19, him 28. But within the first 2 years, I messaged a close friend and asked, am I in an abusive relationship? It wasn't physical yet, but the mental and emotional groundwork was already well laid. I'm 6 years out now, and my self-worth and the effects of the brainwashing still aren't fully healed. Abused women tend to leave 7 times before staying gone. It took me 3 times of leaving to finally stick. Story 71. Well, I am happily married 10 years now. My parents aren't, and with their mistakes, I managed to keep my relationship clear with relatively easy steps. 1. Do not lie. I was a compulsive liar, and I was good at it. God, it felt amazing creating complex stories that people believed. My wife is the opposite. I now tell her everything, even the prices of the stupid stuff I buy for myself. It keeps the air fresh. 2. Be ready to share finances. Many people struggle with this. We started early, created a savings account for the wedding and our life together, and continue to be transparent about spending and household budgeting. 3. Talk about children. We always wanted at least 2. I'm an only child. She has 2 siblings. I see colleagues argue endlessly about whether to have kids. 4. Talk about feelings. When my first daughter was born, I hated her. Hard to admit, but I really could not stand the baby in the house and my wife's attention being taken by her. All is good now. She's 6. I'm crazy about her. Animalistic behavior takes over men in some situations. I even wanted to devour my young at one point. My education and talks with my wife helped me overcome that, and I would never abandon my daughter. Our second daughter will be born soon. Marriage is a union of the most intimate and private matters imaginable. If unsure, live together for a while to see the side of your partner not visible outside the household. I was raised to remain pure and not live together before the wedding. Don't do that. Be reasonable, save yourself if you need to, but live together for a few months. You might discover scattered socks, hair in the drain, and morning toilet sounds are things you aren't prepared for yet. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.